Welcome, everybody. If this is your first time listening to me, my name is Andy Martineau. I talk about all things parenting, really all things life, so we can make our lives and our world better. So, welcome. Today, we're diving into the second chapter of a book I wrote about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, something like that, maybe 4, 2, somewhere in that range. The second chapter is called Control the Controllables. And I was just on a call with my amazing women who I work with inside of my group. And we were doing a deep dive on their parenting and how we can make it better and what they can do and how they can create exactly what they want in their life. And this topic came up. It was at the heart of our discussion today. So I love that we're talking about it in here today on the podcast. It's called Focusing on What We Can Focus On. That's what we're talking about today. So chapter 2, Control the Controllables. I start off by saying the sign of a great parent doesn't have anything to do with your child's behavior and everything to do with the parent's behavior, because we can't control the child's behavior. We really can't. I mean, you could argue against me. You could give them the right bribe. You can give them the right consequence. And yeah, you might temporarily impact their behavior, but long term, your child is an independent person that is going to make their own choices. And as long as you're being a kind human, you're not going to be able to manipulate and control them. So if we can take the focus off our child's behavior, sure, we want to impact it. We want to set them up for a great life. We want to give them tools. We want them to be emotionally resilient. I like to think of it as a gardener who's creating this environment where our children can thrive, where we can thrive, where our partners can thrive. And so, yeah, we have this desire to create a beautiful environment where hopefully we're setting everyone up for success, including ourselves. But ultimately, our kids get to decide what they want to do with their lives. I have one getting married in 3 weeks. I have one moving out in a couple of weeks who's going away to college. My 18-year-old is going to move to Hawaii in January, leaves me 3 at home still. And launching 3 kids within 6 months, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of emotions going on in my brain. I mean, I'm so thrilled. This is what we want as parents, right? Thrilled that they're launching and they're successful and they're doing amazing things with their life. But the emotions are real. So I got to focus on what I can control. I need to control my controllables. I need to look at my behavior. How am I navigating all of this? Am I doing it in a way I respect? Am I getting lost in regret and fear? Am I causing any of my kids to feel like they need to carry the burden I'm carrying as I'm grieving them launching? These are the questions we want to ask. So the sign of a great parent has everything to do with the behavior of the parent. Controlling is like a donut diet. Trying to control your kids' behavior makes about as much sense as only eating donuts while trying to lose weight. It will not work. And when you try to control your kids with consequences, with rewards, with ultimatums, with lectures, you create an unavoidable tug of war. You push, they pull. It's insane. It feels terrible. It takes 2. And typically, we're both happy to play our part because the harder we try to control them, the harder they push back. And we don't want to have them go off the rails. So we got to push harder. And they don't want to listen to us and try to be controlled, or be controlled rather, by us. They don't want to be little robots. So they push back even harder. And this dance of resistance continues for as long as we keep dancing. And I did this dance for a long time, trying to have the perfect kids, trying to be the perfect mom. So much judgment, so much fear, so much misconception of what is actually appropriate for a child's behavior. When my kids were little, I had these grossly off the rail expectations of what was appropriate for them. Just because other adults think it's civilized to act a certain way doesn't mean it's reasonable to ask that of a child. So controlling is a natural response when you think external consequences and rewards will create long-term change to behavior. This is called behavioralism. We're swimming in it like fish. We do not realize that this is the water we're swimming until all of a sudden we realize, hey, I don't like being controlled. I don't like having someone think they can manipulate me or change my behavior with external stimuli, with consequences and reward. I bet it feels crappy for my kids too. And all of the sudden we wake up to the fact that no matter how fancy of a chore chart we have or how dialed in our consequences are, it's not working. And it's because this isn't how human behavior likes to be worked with. We don't like that. We like a different approach. So that's the controlling, that's the behavior modification, behavioralism. We've talked about this in previous episodes. Connecting is a natural response when you understand that consequences don't change behavior long term, and that lasting influence is a result of an amazing relationship with your kids. So if we believe in behavioralism, we're going to resort to controlling, we're going to resort to consequences, we're going to resort to rewards, because that is the mechanism that construct needs to work. But as soon as we take a step back and we look at developmental psychology, we look at attachment theories, we start to realize that it's the attachment that is our preeminent need. It's more important than food and water. It's why parents put themselves at risk and their life's in danger when their child needs them, like a mother running into a burning building. Why would she do that? Because she puts the connection, the relationship ahead of her child. If there's a big natural disaster, the parents aren't abandoning their kids and running for the hills. Even though that probably would be the best thing to preserve their life, they're gathering their children up, which are going to slow them down and need more resources to sustain life, because it's the relationship we care most about. So controlling feels terrible. Connecting feels like heaven. So your job is to remember this. It's easy to get confused about what your parenting job is. How much or little should you be doing for your kids? You can easily get stuck in confusion and worry. And this starts you down a path of desperately trying to control their behavior, fix their behavior, change their behavior, which they pick up on and they don't like. I used to think my job was to control my kids just enough, not too much, just enough to make sure they got straight A's. They always cleaned their room. They were nice to each other. They didn't swear. They wore deodorant, fill in the blank. It could keep going, got into the right college. You could say I was a bit of a control freak, and it left me with a constant parenting headache, and it didn't solve any of those problems. It didn't guarantee straight A's. It didn't guarantee clean rooms. It didn't guarantee they were nice to each other. It just caused a lot of frustration. So what are the controllables? This is a lot of parents who come to me, they're like, this is logically makes sense, but I'm a little nervous because it feels like if I really am honest, I don't have control over a lot of things. So let's talk about that. The controllables. Let me tell you a story. This is what I lay out in my book. It had been a rough night with my kids. It was often a rough night with my kids when my kids were little. I had 6 kids in 8 years. It was a lot. I'm glad we did it. So glad we did it. And it was so hard. It was so hard, but it gave me the perfect environment to face myself and to really have to realize I couldn't control 6 kids at once. There's one of me and 6 of you. So it had been a rough night. I'd gone to sleep feeling like a failure, which is pretty normal. Woke up feeling like a failure, also pretty normal back then. My inner critic was hard at work, thinking, why does this keep happening? You are smart. You should have fixed this by now. You got through nursing school in about 3.5 years. You figured everything out. You figured everything out that you have needed to figure out ever in your life. So why can you not figure this out? Like, what is happening? You're such a failure. Your kids won't listen. They don't respect you. You need to stop yelling at them. But if you stop yelling at them, then maybe they won't listen to you and things will even get worse. And I was just cycling through this. I was measuring my success based on my kids' behavior. And I was drowning in the river of parenting misery. I had a lot of nervous energy, alarm, anxiety, a lot of catastrophizing. I thought I needed to change my kids. This was the problem. I needed to help them stop fighting. I needed them to start listening. Didn't they see I had this beautiful vision for them? If they would do those things and everything would get better. So I was in bed catastrophizing, feeling awful when I had this miraculous thought. I had begun to start to see the light of day. I had begun to start to realize that maybe I was going about things wrong. Maybe there was another way. And this thought, control the controllables, popped in, and it stopped me in my tracks. I wondered what my controllables were. I wanted to know because I did realize that would be a lot more pleasant. And at the moment, it felt like everything was outside of my control. So I pulled out a notebook. I wrote at the top my list of controllables and started writing. Number 1, my perspective, how I decide to look at what my kids are doing. Okay, that seemed reasonable. My actions, how I decided to act around my kids when they don't listen, seemed within my control. My words, what I say and how I say it when I need to set a limit with my kids. My thoughts, what I choose to think about myself and my kids. Okay, it's like making a kind of long list. It was impressive. My plans, how I choose to spend my time, what play dates I schedule, what downtime I have, what I do for exercise, what I cook for dinner. So it's like, okay, cool. My friends, who I choose to invest my time in. Who do I want to spend time with? Who do I want to show up for lunch with or invite over for lunch at my house so that I feel loved and supported? It's okay. My money. So I had control over the way I spent my money and my time to feed my interests and my children's interests. Okay. So I could spend my money on different things depending on what was important to me. The food I ate. So I'd have the energy to keep up with my kids. The media time, what I was watching on TV with the kids or by myself so that I wasn't wasting time. The clothes I wore. Was I wearing clothes that made me feel cute? Was I happy with how I looked? I could make different choices. And what I began to see was that I could insert an endless list of choices that I was able to make and control on a daily basis. Because so often as a parent, I was feeling completely out of control with my kids, with my life, with my time, with my house, everything. It was so easy to focus on what I didn't have control over. And this exercise, this little gift that was given to me, allowed me to start looking at what I did have control over. And once I started listing these things that I had control over, I found way more things on the list than I ever expected. It really changed the way I viewed my life and viewed my parenting. I realized I was never out of control. I had so much I could control, even in situations that I was thinking were very uncontrollable, very out of control. I started focusing on what I could do instead of on what I could not do. So you all, I jumped right into today's episode without telling you what we're doing. I was assuming you'd probably listen to other podcast episodes. What I'm doing in episodes here or there on the podcast is reading through my book, inserting my thoughts, taking you on tangents and stories and ideas and learnings that I've had since I wrote the book. And so that's what we're doing. I'm going through chapter 2 loosely. I'm reading some parts. I'm adding current thoughts, inserting new stories possibly along the way. And so that experience that I write about in my book, where I really got clear on what I was able to control, allowed me to take a bunch of the energy and time and resources I was wasting on keeping alive the idea that I didn't have a lot of control and my kids' behavior and the state of my house and what I had time to do or not to do, reel it in. It was so powerful. I highly, highly recommend that if you have time, maybe pause the podcast right now and just write down a list of all the things you do have control over. If you're feeling overwhelmed or out of control as a parent, because we have these beautiful, adorable, little immature people in our life that do whatever they want. They say the things that no one else will say. They do the things that no one else will do. And they really give us such a valuable and powerful opportunity to expand ourselves on so many levels, intellectually, emotionally, relationally. So let's use this time that we have with them to become the best versions of ourselves. So make a list of your controllables and then come back and join me, because the next thing we're talking about is accepting versus rejecting behavior. That was something I had control over. So accepting your child's behavior does not mean you want that behavior to continue forever. It doesn't. I used to use this all the time when I first started teaching Connect Method Parenting. And I think I was so worried about people thinking that what I was saying is condoning that I had a lot of people think that that's what I was saying, probably because that's the energy I was giving. I don't get that as much, but I do want to make it really clear that accepting does not mean that you want it to continue forever. It doesn't mean that you condone the behavior. It means that you accept that this behavior your child is doing is what they did. That this is reality, and I can fight against it and get my nervous system to be activated and probably go into fight or flight and not respond in a way I'm proud of. Or I can realize this is the best that they could do right now. And if this child could do better, he would do better. But for whatever reason, maybe it's just that he's 3. Maybe it's that he's 12, but he's had a really hard day at school. Maybe he's feeling sick. Maybe his friend didn't invite him to his birthday party. Whatever it is, there's something going on in this child's life that's preventing them from tapping into their full potential. So me accepting that this is where they're at today in this moment, believing in their goodness, allows me to stay grounded so that I can show up and do whatever needs to be done. Do I need to set a limit? Maybe. Do I just need to come alongside their big emotions? Maybe. Do I need to let them get out some anger and then they're going to be able to have more control and do the things they need to do? Maybe. I don't know. But I get to figure that out because I stay regulated. A lot of parents get confused about what accepting means. So I'm going to say it again. Accepting is not the same as condoning. Accepting is about honoring where your child is at this moment without thinking that they should be better, they could be better, they should do things differently, they could do differently. They told me last night they would do things differently. None of that's helpful, because each one of us have had a moment, or many, I've had thousands of moments where if I go back in time, I can see how I didn't show up at my full capacity. And there's a reason. It's not an excuse. It's just there's a reason. And if I could have been more loving or kind or compassionate, whatever was called for in that moment that I feel like was missing, I would have if I could have. And the goal is to learn, why was I throttled, or why was my child throttled from tapping into their full potential? And what would serve them in this moment and down the road? So here are the Connect Method Parenting definitions for accepting and rejecting. So accepting is clearly a verb, and it's letting someone be exactly where they are at in this moment without judgment. Not believing things could be or should be different. Believing the best of another person. Calming the nervous system and creating trust and connection inside of ourselves. Setting limits fueled by connection. Yes, you can still have limits and boundaries from a place of connection and maintain that relationship. It does not mean that you want the behavior or emotion to continue forever. It does not inherently mean you condone the behavior. It does not take away the natural resulting cause and effect. For example, getting caught cheating on a test results in failing in the test. And that's something that happens. And even though they might be doing their best and we accept them, they still have to face the music. They still have to encounter the natural cause and effect that's part of this world. So that's what accepting is for me. That's how I define it within the framework of Connect Method Parenting. So let's talk about rejecting. Rejecting, also a verb. And when we're rejecting, we're believing they could have made a better choice. Now, could they have made a better choice tomorrow or in 10 minutes? Maybe, but in that moment that's already passed, we're stuck thinking they should have, they could have, they know better. Not helpful. Rejecting is thinking another person or situation should be different, instead of just seeing that this is what is and not fighting reality. Rejecting is feeling justified in trying to fix or change a person or a situation. Rejecting is your decision to accept or reject situations behavior or emotions is your superpower and one of your controllables. So you can accept or reject a child's behavior when they throw a fit. You can accept or reject them when they talk back or call you the meanest parent in the world. You can accept or reject how they feel when you see that they've destroyed the kitchen. You have control over whether you accept or reject, okay? So when you discover that your son's room is a mess, and this is after he's promised to clean it, maybe even told you he did, right? You're going to have some thoughts about it. And you can choose what thoughts you want to focus on. You can choose the ones that fill you with frustration or the ones that fill you with peace. The thoughts that frustrate you don't have to go away for you to stop focusing on them. You can choose to focus on the thoughts that bring you peace. You can ask yourself, what do I want more of? Do I want to feel more frustration or more peace? This might not feel like a choice, but it is. It might take practice, but it is something we can learn. And it is a way we can show up, regardless of how chaotic or crazy the situation may be. Sometimes the thoughts you think aren't accurate, and other times the thoughts you think are accurate but not useful. So clients come to me with problems that feel insurmountable and hard to accept, and they'll say to me, my child lies. My 13-year-old doesn't talk to me at all. My child doesn't care what I say. He ignores me. Or my child's making terrible decisions, or she should be more mature by now. My toddler's throwing a fit every day. And I get it. They feel big and they feel heavy. And as long as we think they're insurmountable, they will be insurmountable. But as soon as we take back the power that we're giving away to these situations, we take back our agency and we say, okay, I might not be able to change them, but can I change the way I'm interacting with them? That's what we were talking about on today's call that I was doing with my amazing moms that were in there. It was this, everybody was focusing or realizing that they wanted to focus on how they showed up to the situation, realizing that that would begin to have a ripple effect on everything else. It didn't mean they weren't going to set the limit. It didn't mean that they weren't going to find resources. It didn't mean that they weren't going to set boundaries perhaps, but the way they showed up would be the most powerful thing that they could bring to the equation. And we could get into mirror neurons and how when we show up a different way and we're not triggered, the mirror neurons our brain's using that is sending out this signal of the emotion we're feeling. So we're feeling confident and calm and focused and grounded and connected. That's what our kids are going to feel. If we're feeling uncertain and worried and defensive and we've got to prove something, our kids are going to feel it. So one of my big insurmountable problems that I talk about in the book that was really hard for my brain to accept, I want to share it with you because, to be honest, the problem wasn't that big or insurmountable as I look back. I've had time to think about it and reflect on it, but at the time it felt huge. And I want to use it as an example because often it's the little experiences that our brains make gigantic that end up tripping you up. So in the book, I say a few months ago, this was a few years ago now, my son came back from visiting friends from another state for the weekend. We had just moved different states. It was hard. It was amazing, but it was sad to be away from friends. And he walked in from the airport into our house, and his sister immediately said something that he interpreted as rude and snarky. I think it was pretty rude and snarky. And he responded by saying, "You are so mean. Why are you like that? You're never going to learn to be nice." And then he turned to me and he said, "You know, Mom, you need to fix this. The so-and-so, which is the family, the so-and-sos, it was the family name he stated that he had just been with, he said, would never let their kid say something like that. They give them a consequence. They would take something away. My friend's mom would fix this. You need to fix this." And my heart sank. My brain started flipping out. I went to worst case scenario. My brain loves doing that. Catastrophizing is its favorite thing to do. It's pretty typical for all human brains, but mine's especially, qualified to do it. It loves doing it. And I wondered a couple of things. I wondered how my daughter was going to take this comment that she was rude and mean. She'd been labeling herself as mean a lot and has rude a lot. And she had a lot of self-doubt, a lot of negative thoughts in her brain about herself. And I was thinking, she doesn't need more evidence. She really doesn't need more evidence. This is true. This is just going to make it harder for her to accept herself as anything but rude and mean. I knew she wasn't mean. She's just really sensitive. She's very, very sensitive. She wore her emotions on her sleeve. And yeah, she sometimes was unfiltered and said things, but it wasn't because she was unkind. It was because she was triggered or because there were lots of reasons that I could see clearly. Didn't excuse the rudeness, but I could see why she did it. And I was trying to help her cultivate a new way of thinking about herself so she could get out of it. But I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to use this as evidence that that's just who she is. And then she's going to live into it. Then my brain thought, I have failed as a mother. That was so mean of him to say something like that to his sister. I've taught him better. My kids aren't going to have good relationships. So I was judging him and simultaneously judging myself for not helping him be better. So for a minute, I rejected both of us. I wanted things to be different. My mind spun out of control. My emotions kicked up. I felt terrible. Emotions were high. Intelligence was low. And then I paused and I started asking myself some questions that I'd been working on a lot at the time. And I'm going to share them with you now. I call them now my 6 acceptance questions. And their intention is to help lean into a situation and drop the resistance and see things more clearly so that we can navigate it from our highest self instead of from our lowest base self. That's emotion driven. I want to come from compassion. I want to be alpha still, but I want to be kind. So the first question is, how does what he says make perfect sense to him? So the first question is always about getting into the perspective of one of the other people in the scenario. So my answer to this question, it took me some seconds, some minutes to come out, and I tried to really understand him. It made total sense. He doesn't like the way his sister talked to him. He just been with a family who he felt behaved way better. He didn't have a little sister with the big emotions. He was probably feeling frustrated that we just moved him from the place he'd always called home. So I could see just right off the bat a few really obvious things that were probably causing him to respond this way and to see the situation the way he did. So I took a deep breath and I relaxed and I started to accept him and reminding myself that he was doing the best he could in the moment. Second, I wanted to get clear on what these words he was saying was telling me about him. So I asked myself, what do his words tell me about him? And this helps remind me that what other people say have nothing to do with me and everything to do with them. So I thought for a second, maybe he was struggling with the move again, being away from his friends, tired from the flight, frustrated with the way his sister had been. And it had built up. So I was, okay, this is good. This is more information. It makes sense. This is helping inform me of what's going on for him. Third question, how does what my daughter did make perfect sense to her? So now I'm looking at the other person's perspective. And I could recognize how her nervous system was probably triggered from the new school. She was had a big test. She was stressing about starting at a new gymnastics club. She was in a bit of defensive mode right now. She was trying to protect herself. Then I went into, okay, so I'm understanding more what's going on for these two individuals. I could have asked myself that. How does it make perfect sense that I jumped into judgment too? What are my thoughts telling me about myself? I kind of had an idea of that, but you could do that as well. And then I would follow up with, what would serve everyone's highest good right now? Now, this answer was pretty easy, especially in this situation for me to figure out. The best thing I could do right now was to love and accept everyone exactly where they were, including me, because I was judging. I was defensive, not try to fix or change or correct, just accept. So I took a few deep breaths and I really tried to lean into everyone is doing their best right now. And what would serve everyone's highest good is for me to love and accept them. Okay, fifth question. What am I making his words mean about me? I could also have said, what am I making my daughter's behavior mean about me? Because I'm wanting to understand the meanings my brain is by default putting on these events or people. And then why? And this was pretty illuminating to answer. Initially, I made it mean that I wasn't a good mom, that I was a failure. This was one of my brain's favorite stories to go to, especially at this time in my life. I made it mean that things weren't going the way they should be. I saw the story and started to release it. It didn't mean any of those things. It just meant that I was a human having an experience. So I saw what I was by default making it mean, and then I started to offer another story to myself. And then I asked myself, do I want to accept what just happened? If not, why? If yes, why? And I really did want to accept what happened. I didn't feel like I needed to correct. I didn't feel like I needed to get anybody to say anything or to apologize or to offer any type of sanction or limit in this case. I just wanted to accept what happened and understand that it made sense to them. I wanted to stay calm and connected to my kids. So I did, and I will say that the situation dissipated very quickly, and everybody came to their senses. He apologized, she apologized. We had a great reunion after he was gone. It was so powerful to drop into acceptance and controlling what I had control over instead of what I didn't have control over. So after answering these questions in my head, it didn't seem like a big deal anymore, and it didn't take long for things to go back to normal. So at the end of chapter 2, if you have the book, you can open it up because this will probably be easier for you to create if you have the questions in front of you, but I'll run through it really quickly. I have a your turn section, and I first invite you to make an acceptance plan. So what are you having trouble accepting? Write something down and then answer those 6 questions. And there's space for that in the book. So you can go grab that, the Kindle or the copy of it on Amazon if you want to, or just I'll put the questions in the show notes too. So hopefully you can do the acceptance plan regardless. The second thing I offer you to do at the back of the book is to make your controllables list. So go through what I outlined at the beginning of this podcast episode and how I started really being a detective and finding everything that was in my control, and create your own version of that. So those are the two action items I have for you at the end of today's episode. I hope that you'll go do them, because knowing is not the same as doing. There's practice and implementation and going out in the wild and trying out new ideas. That's what creates sustainable, lasting change, which is what I want for you. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We finished chapter 2. It was miraculous, all in one episode. And we'll dive into chapter 3 next time. Let's see what the name is. I can't remember. It's been so long since I wrote this. Oh, nothing has gone wrong here. It's a good one. It's a good chapter. So I can't wait to dive into that with you next time. But until then, spend the next few days creating your controllable list, what you have control over, looking at the acceptance plan or acceptance questions rather. Find a situation that you feel resistance towards and create more acceptance towards it by answering those questions. And until next time, as always, go connect with your kids, go have fun, go play a little. If you're listening to this when it's being released, it's summer still, so go enjoy the summer with your kids before we get back to school in a little bit, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. See you later. Bye. Thanks so much for listening, you all. If you are ready to learn more about Connect Method Parenting, if you have been listening to the podcast and you think, ooh, I'd love to be able to implement this in my life and with my parenting more, then check out Pivot. It's my 8-week program where we deep dive into learning and implementing Connect Method Parenting so that you can take this information and transform your parenting journey. Head over to connectmethodparenting.com to find out when the next group starts.